Happy days. Thanks for that. Now, listen, another fascinating look at the incredible history of where we live. I love going out with the historians, and JP Maxwell is a great lad. He knows his onions. He lectures in this type of thing, and he's got a cracking book out already called Water Street, a brand new one due out now. All about Abercrombie Square. And I didn't know it had connections with Abraham Lincoln. Did you? No, I didn't know that. Well, I went out with him and I found out more. So today I've come out and about to a very busy park in Abercrombie Square, a place absolutely steeped in history, and a history that means such a lot to my guest, JP Maxwell, author, raconteur. Can we call you raconteur, John?
You can call me anything you like, mate. That's one.
He doesn't mean that. He doesn't mean that. You've just walked me around a very, very important building and pointed out a number of things. Just tell me exactly where we are.
It's number 19, Abercrombie Square, which is steeped in Confederate history. The building itself was put together by a guy called Charles Prelude, who was a cotton broker and the Confederate banker in Europe. And it's got a grandiose title as well, Sean. It was called at the time by the Liverpool Mercury newspaper the Confederate White House in Europe. And that is no casual title either. It was built that way. We've just had a look around it, and I think you probably agree. It's got so many of the trappings of what you might see in Washington. It's
very ornate, isn't it, inside?
It absolutely drips power.
Yeah.
And it was built as a statement, really. I've used that place itself in my book. I've actually written in there in connection with my new book, which is called the Americans of Abercrombie Square, which is a sequel to my first book, Water Street. Yeah. And it regards the machinations. 1865, the building itself was built in 1862. It regards the machinations in Liverpool in connection with the Lincoln assassination. I don't know if you know this, but...
Well, I didn't know, and there was a lot I didn't know, because outside, before we even got into the building, you pointed out on the pillars there's a number of stars there, isn't it?
There's 7 stars on the pillars, which indicate the original seceded states. Wow. The states that left the Union to form the Confederacy. The Confederacy never actually was recognised as a state by anyone, but one of their war aims, and particularly going through this place, was to be recognised by Britain especially, but also by the French Empire, Napoleon III. Petitions were made directly to them, and it had quite a bit of traction. They weren't that far off. If that would have happened, you would have had a very different outcome to that war, and indeed to history.
And as you walk into the foyer, just past the front doors, if you look up, there's a massive painting of a palm tree, isn't it?
That palm tree has huge significance. It represents the Palmetto Brigade, who smashed the hell out of Mexico prior to the American Civil War. So they were hardened. They were farm boys and fighters. Farm and fighting is the kind of the moniker that was attached to them. They would get across Mexico and California, New Mexico, all those huge tracts of land that became part of the United States was down to the brigades like them. The regiment actually formed the basis of the Confederate Army, and they're exceptional fighters. I'm saying this as if it's kind of out of admiration. It isn't really, because I keep saying the Confederacy was a very toxic idea, but yeah. I think we need to know what indication of the kind of power and money that was attached to this wannabe state. They actually didn't become a nation, but they came very close to becoming a nation.
Oh, but it's something quite different now. It's a place to go and study, but you can't help but feel the majesty of it when you walk in. As you say, the power.
It's extremely powerful. It's one of the reasons why I actually chose to sit in there and write some of the work, because it comes across as so much money was put into this place, and you understand why. Liverpool, King Cotton at the time, the cotton trade had huge connections with the South. Obviously, rum, molasses, the Indies and so forth, but Liverpool really was built on the basis of King Cotton in the mid-19th century. It exploded as a city. Also, though, I want to kind of mention the nefarious connections of this place, and in terms of my book, it's all about how the Lincoln assassination, and I've got evidence of this through Cornell University, the Lincoln assassination was funded from that building. No. So President Abraham Lincoln ultimately was assassinated on 14th of April, Ford's Theatre, Washington. off the back of money that was generated from that place right there. So here in Liverpool, you've got this huge moment in history that can be traced all the way back to number 19 Abercrombie Square.
There's an amazing big frieze over the room that you were writing your stuff in. There's a ceiling rose followed by a massive circular painting. Tell us about that.
That was put together, commissioned by Charles Prelou, and his wife Mary Wright. Mary Wright was connected to a very powerful and rich Liverpool merchant family, and they occupied Allerton Hall originally, so you might have heard of connections of the Confederacy in Allerton Hall, and they're very strong. They originally lived in there, and they built this number 19 as specifically for use for Charles Coombe Prelou's office. But that frieze itself depicts Mary Wright. It was very trendy at the time, if you were well off, to kind of show off your ostentation, to depict yourself in classical form. That was a big thing. So she sat there in the toga overlooking the students these days, but back then, it depicts slaves around her, and it remains in place. It's kind of quite startling when you look up and see it.
Wow. How much did this influence your book then?
In a big way. I'm a big fan of actually going to places, and you'll know through our previous conversations talking about Water Street and all the other the different parts of Liverpool that is connected to. I did the same thing by going here and letting it influence me and discovering about the building. Like I say, I looked into archives as well, so that Cornell archive I mentioned earlier, and it really kind of brings it all together, especially if you look at you get a feel for the kind of ostentation and power. It's like if walls could talk. It's so strong in that building, even now, even to this day, even though it has a sort of different purpose.
It's amazing stuff, isn't it? More with JP about the new book and the history of Liverpool in that particular street, that particular thoroughfare. After this, from The Real Thing, you were Sean Styles on BBC Radio Merseyside. Great to have you there, Douglas. So come on, let's delve back into some more Merseyside history. We're taking a look at Abercrombie Square with JP Maxwell. Really, really interesting stuff. It's an amazing thing for me to watch people walking in and out flippantly in a way, without realising the immense history of that building.
It's absolutely startling, Sean, and connected to that, I just want to get across that was the epicentre of a much bigger support for the Confederate States of America. Even looking around this, we're sat in the square right now, even looking around this square, all these lovely Victorian buildings and Georgian buildings, these were occupied by the neighbours, the very neighbours, including the mayor who was next door, were heavily in favour of the Confederacy. They saw it as a good thing. During those war years, 1861 to 65, Liverpool was a fan base for this. Money was getting raised hand over fist. Let's not forget, Liverpool was one of the richest cities in the world at that time, and they were raising money left, right and centre for it. They had fetes, they had galas at St George's Hall to raise the money. Nothing was being hidden. Even though Britain was neutral, Liverpool very much wasn't neutral. There were, of course, some voices of dissent, but the vast majority were in favour of the Confederacy, even to the extent of this building was built with a view to Jefferson Davis, the president of the Confederacy, occupying it when he was over in Europe, coming over here, and he actually did, even though the war was ended after 1865. There was a surrender. Davis came to Liverpool. He was promised work by Royal Insurance. Big stink was kicked up about it because, the Confederacy by then was a defeated power, and all this support just evaporated very quickly because, of course, they didn't want to cause a poor relation with the American administration at that point. They wanted to sever all ties, and everything's hunky-dory. Let's get back to business. That was the idea. But the president of the Confederacy, Jefferson Davis, lived in Liverpool, Belvedere Road, but also occupied 19 Abercrombie Square. So it was a Confederate White House, and the Confederate president actually went there.
So how much has been written about this? Are you the first person to write about this subject as such?
In terms of fiction, there isn't that much out there. I've kind of discovered something which is been put into the kind of fictional milieu, and as I've kind of our conversations we've had before. As I said, you know, you bring in like the westerns and historical fiction into it, but I found it actually quite easy to write in many ways because the scandal is already there. It's right in front of you. You know, this was a scandal, and after the American Civil War, it was buried, but it was left in plain sight. The symbols are all there. They're easy to pick up on, and the history has been written about in history books, but it's sort of, because Liverpool's population declined since the Second World War, a direct relationship with American history, American historians has sort of gone out the window. So I'm looking to restore this a little bit and bring this back into the public consciousness.
What's the book called?
The book's called The Americans of Abercrombie Square, and it's out now on Amazon and all good bookshops.
Who will it appeal to, John?
I think it will appeal to anyone who's interested in Liverpool history, which is probably anyone in Liverpool, because you can't ignore it, really. I know from the readership of Water Street and the feedback I've got from that I did a session in the Athenaeum with the Liverpool Maritime Society the other day. So anyone who's interested in the kind of seafaring tradition of the city and the port, even the slave industries, all those connections will find interesting stuff in this book. I'm also taking it out across the world. I know people listen to Radio Merseyside, emigre Scousers from all over the place. We get anywhere. We're Scousers. You put someone on Mars, there'll be a Scouser sitting there going,
"Where have you been?
Yeah,
I got here 20 years ago."
Exactly, you took your time, didn't you? So, you know, this is something that does spread across, and I'm deliberately doing this, you know, Ireland in particular, because the book does have Irish characters in there, and also going across to New York, Eastern Seaboard, all those cities, Chicago, Baltimore, that have a very strong link, historic link with Liverpool. That's where I'm going to be taking it. Even San Francisco. San Francisco was called the Liverpool of the Pacific. You know, so all these connections are there with the US and Ireland that I'm looking to build upon.
Where can we get the book, John?
You can get it in Amazon. You can also get it in bookshops directly. So you can go into Waterstones. You can order it from Waterstones. It will be available there as well very, very soon. I'm looking to do a launch event in Waterstones, so keep an eye out for that. But I'll also keep you updated, Sean, because it's going to be going here, there, and everywhere.
And it's called again?
The Americans of Abercrombie Square.
Great to see you, pal.
Great to see you, mate. Cheers.
Do you know, it was a lovely afternoon. We were sat in the park there in Abercrombie Square. Lovely, a few benches there. And apologies for the leaf blower who was working all the way through that interview in the background.
He's got a job to do, hasn't he, Sean?
It added to the ambience of the park.
It's the atmosphere behind you.
And it is autumn.
But that's it. All the leaves are brown and all that.
All the leaves are brown. But, you know, some really, really interesting history. And you walk past these buildings and every day and you think, oh, nice building that, but immense history there. Great lad, John. It was great to be out with him.